if you do all of those things, I think you can be whoever the fuck you want to be in like 18 months.
Hey guys, welcome back to Be the Standard. I'm Denny Jamazzo, your host, and I'm here today with a very special guest. Her name is Kate Hastings, and she is a mental health coach. She's also a personal trainer, as well as a former teammate or a current teammate in the Forge with me, founded by Nick Lavery. What's up, Kate?
What's going on? Thanks for having me
Of course.
on.
No, it's exciting to get to finally meet you virtually. We still haven't met in person yet, but nice to meet you virtually. I'm trying to get all of the SMEs from the Forge on. You're the first one besides some people that I had on prior to even joining the Forge myself. So very excited to meet you. But yeah, I want to kind of start with, you kind of sent over some things. We talked a little bit about, some of the things you've experienced, some of the things I've experienced. So I think, maybe start with, where you're from, and, maybe a little bit about your childhood and upbringing and all that.
All right. Yeah. So I'm originally from Connecticut. I've lived in Florida since 2013, Miami for 9 years, St. Pete for now 3, which I just love St. Pete so much. I grew up in a great household. I'll speak about my family, but I do love my mom and dad and have a phenomenal relationship regardless of our childhood. And I just grew up with a father who struggled with mental illness and addiction, and a mom who just did it all. And my dad has such a great heart. He just had a really hard childhood, and he just never got the help he needed. But that doesn't mean that it didn't impact our childhood. But I love my parents tremendously, and but that led to a lot of results in my life with growing up with a father who wasn't available, who struggled with mental illness, drug addiction, treated my mom a certain way, a lot of like unpredictability, a lot of chaos growing up. And I started throwing up in the 5th grade with bulimia. It was just a way to cope when you're a child and you have no escape. You try to find the closest thing to you. So I think food was that for me, and the release was the binging and throwing up. And that lasted for almost like into my 20s. But I started, with abusive relationships at the age of 16 till 30 years old, and, grew up with learning disabilities as well. So I really struggled in school. But then, 21 pretty much saved my life with like fitness and jujitsu, and, started on this like health journey, but I kind of took like one extreme to the other. When you don't know, you don't know. Like I had so many underlying issues of like symptoms of like CPTSD and just operating out of like hypervigilance and, I was a very extreme person. So if I did something, I did it to the extreme, right? Even if like it's a good thing, whether it's like working out or eating well, I was like, I teach people about discipline now, but like, I sometimes wish I still had a little bit of that rigid discipline, because I was like such an animal when it came to like suppressing pain and pushing through. And like, I wouldn't change my childhood for anything, but it taught me how to be a very resilient person. But I think there comes a time in your adulthood where that resilience needs to be healed, right? Like I don't need to operate out of that like extremist, overachieving, overcompensating, impulsive, extreme person, so there's a balance there that lies. So yeah, and I just got passionate about teaching people with mental and emotional health. That's what really helped me. I didn't even know I had emotions, let alone that was what was really making me sick. I was going to like doctors, like my hormones were burned, like I was like exhausted. And when you don't know what a real love looks like and what a relationship should be, I didn't really even realize I could tell when I was physically hit that wasn't okay, but I didn't have the ability to say, I'm not okay, or I need help. Like there was so much shame. So it was more mental and emotional, but there was physical abuse in that too. And that was what was making me so sick, dating narcissistic men and just being drained of my life force, and not even like being able to go to a therapist and say like, this is wrong and this is what's happening. It was just like so normalized to me and how I grew up. And until, I just wanted to check out, and I was like, well, I have nothing to lose and I don't know what's wrong with me. And just kind of started my health, mental health journey from there at like probably 30 years old.
Yeah, no, that's a lot. I'd say outside of, dating narcissistic men, I've experienced a lot of those same things, right? With the abusive upbringing and the battles with alcohol, with seeing parents and people close to me deal with those kinds of things, and I also struggled in school growing up. Like I was never diagnosed with dyslexia, but there was an issue because I could read like an entire book and understand about 5% of it, right? Like something was off.
Yeah.
So I totally get it. But you know, what part of Connecticut were you from, anyways? Where's that?
Monroe,
Where's that?
little town. It's close, like Trumbull,
Oh, okay.
Shelton, not too far from Fairfield.
Okay, because I grew up in
Yeah.
Thompson, Connecticut, which is the top northeast right corner, like the smallest town. We had about
Oh,
six
okay.
thousand people in that town, I think. And I actually did my first 3 years of college at Central Connecticut. Um, so
Oh, okay. Yeah, I know
I'm
that.
familiar, obviously, with Connecticut. But you started smoking weed and partying and drinking at 14. Wow,
Yeah,
wow.
14. Yeah, it was also a way
Hmm.
to escape. I just found like relief, right? I think when you're suffering so much, even with my father, right? Like when I learned so much about addiction, I have so much compassion for people who struggle with addiction because at the core of it, I believe it's just trying to find some sort of relief from like a tremendous amount of like suffering and pain. So yeah, I found like relief in that, and I partied like an animal until 21. I was dating a guy, and like his idea of going to like having fun was going to the gym. So I was like, all right, let me just morph into whatever he likes. And I saw like what was capable and what I was possible. Like I was strong, I was naturally athletic, and so I just went full force on that. I stopped drinking at 21, so I kind of got my partying out before I was even
That
legalized.
doesn't happen very often. I've never even heard of that. That's good.
Yeah, it just fell out of my life. Like I'm not sober. I can have a drink and put it down, or I could take a sip. And I haven't had
Hmm.
a sip in a few years, but like it's not a struggle with me. I just love working out so much that I don't feel the need to drink, and it causes depression and anxiety. So it's
Yeah, I mean,
just
I tell
not something I
myself all
like.
the time, right? Like, there's really nothing good that comes from alcohol. It's just, I'm not a sober person either. I'll drink
Yeah.
occasionally, but far less than I used to because I've used it as a coping mechanism to deal with, just some difficult things in my life, like coming home from overseas, and I went through a divorce, so I drank a lot then. So there
Mm,
were just a few times where alcohol was just kind of my vice. But now it's, I can
hmm.
still go out and have one drink, two drinks, and stop. I don't need to get drunk. I don't need to feel anything because I love feeling just 100% every day when I wake up. And um, you know, the older I get, the worse the hangovers get, right? So it's like
Oh my
I
gosh.
just don't see the
Yeah.
value in it anymore. So I mean, I'll still have a few drinks here and there. Like, don't get me wrong, but maybe once a month, twice a
Hmm.
month max. Um, but yeah, that's good that you were able to give it up, before you were legal or right around when you're. That's usually when people are starting to really take off. So
I was already done, but I love chocolate. If that's one thing, if that's like my vice, it's like I will go to chocolate. Like I
yeah,
don't care about alcohol, but like I will, if I'm like emotional, like I'll want to eat sweets. So everyone, I'm always honest about my life, like, but I don't seek like pot, oh gosh, like
yeah.
pot or drinking. I just have no tolerance for it anymore, and it
Yeah, I
makes me
tell
feel
people all the
terrible.
time, like, I'm really into fitness. I'll work out like a maniac, but like, don't come to me for nutrition because I can't. Like, I can do the like 80-20, right? I'll eat good most of the time, but I mean,
Hmm.
if you catch me on a Saturday night, there's a slim chance that I'm eating, healthy and all of that. Because people are like,
Yeah.
well, you look that way because you work out and you eat right. I'm like, I work out, but I don't, don't come to me for nutrition advice, like I was saying. Yeah, that's funny. Talk to me. I'm interested
Gotta
to
have
hear
balance.
how you say in your thing that you gave your life to Jesus. I want to hear more about that because we don't shy away from that stuff here.
Hmm.
Because myself, my co-host who couldn't be here, we're religious as well. We have a relationship with God as well. So talk to me about that and how
Hmm.
that's impacted your journey onto just overcoming some of those difficulties. And you seem very well put together from everything I see. And I have a hard time believing that your relationship with God doesn't play a huge role in that.
Ugh, like I don't want to get emotional, but like it
Yeah.
honestly plays like everything. I was when you don't, I think we're all searching for something, and I really struggled with the concept of Jesus. I could roll with God because that was a God of my own understanding, and that was a God of me being able to still do what I wanted to do. and live the way that I wanted to live. And so I always believed in a God. Like, you look outside and you can't deny that there isn't a God out there, right? And I remember like always waking up so depressed, wanting to die, and just being like, I don't understand, like, why you keep waking me up, right? Like, what do you have in store for me? And just throughout my wrestling with God in 2019, I had a terrible breakup and it ended in court. I obviously won, but it brought me to my knees of being like, why do I keep ending up here with these monsters and in these terrible situations, like awful, right? Like, to the point where I had to almost spend a lot of money on a lawyer. And that was where it brought me to my knees and started to search for something more. And I had an incredible family in my life who, they're the Oaks, that's their name, and they've just modeled like a tremendous marriage and their kids, and like there was a light that's so bright and still shines. I love them to death. It was like undeniable, right? Like, their light was so bright, and they just like adopted me. I really struggled in Miami, just with functioning, right? Like, I think with trauma, like I would always be like behind in life. Like, I was like, why do like 28-year-olds like have their life together, and why am I still like struggling with my finances and trying to like get it all together? And they just like kept like discipling me and bringing me under their wing and just like loving me. Like, I knew that they loved Jesus, but I just like, I would go to church for 3 years after that incident in 2019, and I would just stand there and like, but I just kept showing up, right? But I really wrestled with the name Jesus and what that meant. And I had all these questions and I just couldn't really understand. And in 2 years ago, I thought I was going to be with the man I was going to marry, and he just broke my heart. Like, just the rug got pulled out from underneath me, and I was like, man, like, okay, like, we're here again. It wasn't as the bad as the monsters in the end, but it was like almost a different type of heartbreak where it wasn't a monster, so I didn't know how to deal with that. And then I was like, all right, like, the last thing that I've really tried, I've done everything, I'm gonna try Jesus. And like, there was like, as if there was this fire that was like lit in me, and like, it was finally like, we got her finally. Like, it's like the puzzle pieces just connected, and like, my whole life I've been protected and guided, and I can look back and see that now. So I got baptized. The Oaks baptized me in Miami, and my life just started to change. Like, there was this peace, and I know you could probably relate to this, but like, I've never felt peace in my life. Like, growing up in a home where there was no peace. We had our physical needs met. My mom worked. I had a roof over my head. We had food. We went to school, but there was no peace. There was always, I didn't know what was going to walk through the door. There was Christmases were destroyed. Like, there was just never peace. So with Jesus, like, just baptizing, and then like my heart just got on fire, and I just started to go to church, and the words in the Bible just started to come alive, and I could understand, and things that I was like shackled to, which was like shame and lust and unworthiness, were like broken off of me. And I was like, whoa, like, this is insane. And it wasn't even like, oh, I came to Christ and I said, I think so many people think like, oh, I need to come to him sinless. And it's like, no, he transforms our sin in that moment. And, then I was just so on fire, and I still am. And I started a little faith and fitness ministry at my gym, and it's grown. Last session, we had 70 people there. It's like, I love to share the gospel. I love to share what's possible with Christ in your life, because I was so against Jesus, and I was so against this, and like, now he's transformed me so much, and it's undeniable what has happened in my life, that I can't keep it inside of me, that it's like a burning fire to share the gospel, who Christ is, what's possible. A woman of no worth, a woman of no value, a woman who would put myself in positions to be abused. And now it's like the complete opposite. And I've done a lot of work. I've done ayahuasca, I've done healing, I've done a lot of things, and like, it's crazy to say, but Jesus is really it. It's even just wild to me, because it was something I resisted. It was something I didn't want. And it's something that has changed my life forever.
That's one of the coolest things I've heard. I've had my own struggles with that as well. I grew up, at one point I did go to Catholic school in middle school for 7th and 8th grade. I was just getting into too much trouble in public school, and my aunt and her husband, even though they really couldn't afford it, they just sent me there. And so I went to Catholic school. I kind of got into it and felt like very religious, had a good relationship with God, all that stuff. Then I ended up back in public school for high school and everything. Was religious, right? Like Catholic, but never really went to church. I did any of that stuff, but I believed. Then, fast forward, I'm 28 years old, 27 years old, and 28 years old in Afghanistan. And, you're getting shot at by people who believe that it's their religious duty to kill you. And so I took a step
Yeah.
back and was like, this isn't for me. I'm done with it. I never had a negative thing to say about religion as a whole or people who were believers. I was just like, if that works for you, great. But for me right now, it's just, I'm done. You know what I mean? So I took a step back, and probably about a year and a half ago, literally out of curiosity, I was like, you know what? I believed in this at one time, and I just got away from it. I mean, let's see if there's more there. And so I asked my girlfriend at the time, her father, because he goes to church every Sunday. He's big into it. And so I was just like, you know what? I think I want to start reading the Bible. Where should I start? What should I do? And so he recommended just start reading the New Testament. So I started reading that, and I've read it twice. And it's just, you look at those stories, you read those scriptures, and you're like, so much of this applies now, right? This thing was written how many thousands of years ago, and it still applies. So I've found my way back over the last 16 months or so, and I've just seen. I still don't go to church, but I read it, and I talk to God every night. I just speak the words. I just say things. I never ask for anything. I don't want anything. I'm just very grateful for what I do have, and that's the conversation every day, every night when I'm in bed. Is I appreciate it. Just put me on the path you want me on, and give me the tools to get there. And that's my conversation every single day. But it's crazy when you start to put in that effort and make that conscious decision to do that. That good things just seem to happen, right? So it is pretty incredible. But your journey is that's wild.
It's wild to me, and I think like you yourself, maybe in Catholicism, and I think I've never met religion, and I think when people meet religion and not relationship, it's a very different road as to their path and walk with Christ or with God. People get church hurt. There's a lot of things that happen in the Catholic Church that is not acceptable with all the pedophilia. There's so many things. But when you understand God and who he is and your relationship and the love with him, you understand we're all sinners. So like even a pastor or even a person at church, they're a sinner. They're not God. And, when we put people on the wrong pedestal, not Christ, then it gets into a position where people walk away from the faith or don't have faith because they met religion. They haven't met, God in a relationship with him.
Yeah, and you just said it perfectly, right? We're all sinners, and that kind of leads me into what I want to talk about next, and that's, when I decided, more than once in my life that I needed to make some pretty significant changes in my decision making, and whether that meant like, who I'm dating and spending my time with, who, the actions I'm taking, my physical health, everything, drinking, I kind of would take a step back. And the last time was after my divorce. I started, like I said, drinking a lot and, just doing things that were not okay. And so I had to take a step back, and I was like, I can't do this shit anymore. I need to make some changes. So what I did was I was like, I can't just change and say I'm going to change and that's going to happen. Right. So I put together these principles, and now they're basically the foundation of this podcast. And that's, setting standards for yourself and creating habits for yourself, and executing on the things that you say you're going to do. And then lastly, holding yourself accountable to your own standards and things of that nature. For you to get from where you've been to where you are now, you've probably had to do all of those things. So I'm curious to know, you seem like a person who's built off of principles. I can tell by your posts within the Forge and within, your social media. I haven't had a chance to listen to your podcast yet, but I'm sure your standards are ingrained in there as well. But I'm curious to know, the things that are your standards. Like, what are the most valuable things to you that you just don't compromise on, and how do you execute on that and make sure you're holding yourself to those standards?
I think that when you I understand wholeheartedly what it's like to have no value, no standards, and the suffering that takes place when you don't have that. And I got to the point in my life 3 years ago, even being like a healthy person, a nice person. I've always been a decent human being and an excellent person, but at the foundation of my core was always broken, right? It was like, I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy. I'm not deserving of love. And if those things are running your life, it doesn't matter how many standards you set. because you will still continuously set yourself on fire. You'll continuously self-sabotage. You will continuously run to the very things that break you. And I was at this point, and I love Jordan Peterson, right? He's like one of my, besides Jesus
He's a
and Tony
stud.
Robbins, he's like
He's the
my
man.
go-to man. Yeah, he's like, yeah, I been listening to him before he was even famous. I started listening to him in 2018. So I just love to see his evolution, but he's so much about courage and confronting and just being a courageous person and like putting yourself out there. And I just got to the point where I was like, I'm suffering so much that I have to see what it's like to suffer for the opposite. Like I'm like doing all these great things, yet I'm suffering on the inside. So I just burned it all. Like I literally, that's where my business came from. It was like, the original name was going to be Wholesome Perspective. And then I just kept like wrestling with it. And
I'm
then
not
like I
laughing
went
at the
and did
name.
ayahuasca and then I
It's
came
just, I
back.
was laughing kind of at you.
Oh yeah, because I'm not wholesome. Yeah, literally. I was like, what is happening? I went to do plant medicine in the jungle. And this was before Christ, but went to go there because I was just, my symptoms were just so ingrained in who I was that I couldn't even see to address anything. And this was like my last hope. I came back and I saw everything for what it was. And I was like, oh, it really does take like burning everything, like burn 90% of who you are. There's like 10% is going to be left. And so I just set it all on fire. I was like, I'm done. I'm done with these people. I'm done with these relationships. I'm done with like all my ex-boyfriends, block, delete. I wish you the best. I'm going to throw out all my stuff. Like I've had like clutter in my life. Like I just purged everything. I got a new car.
You
I like
wash
went
that shit
ham, like
every
literally,
day
like
too.
it like, literally, I know, I love my car. But what people don't understand is like I have a nice little Audi, and I drove a beat up Honda Accord for 9 years, and I had two relationships where two guys, one ripped the handle off and one sideswiped my car. And so that car means so much to me, more than just, I love fast cars actually. I love cars in general, but like that car specifically means so much more to me than just having a nice car, but like how I used to allow my things to be treated and how I treat them now and the respect that I have in my life. And so, you know, it's when you're a person that continuously allows like disrespect, you have to understand like you're a common denominator in the problem. So I had to see like I was a problem and I was an issue in it too, driven by my childhood trauma. But like I was just like, I can't do this anymore. I told people the truth. There's people that I was engaging with in Miami, especially. I said, I'm sorry I pretended to be your friend and I was really inauthentic with you. And I wish you the best, but for me to continuously be your friend won't serve you, because I'm not going to just tolerate the intolerable anymore. And Denny, like literally one day I woke up and I left Miami and didn't tell anyone. I packed my things and left. I was going to marry this other guy. There's two guys in the running. And I said, like, do you want to make this work? And he was like, no. And I'm so thankful, because I would have stayed if he had said yes. And he was the only thing that was holding me there. And I was like, even my roommate, we just had it out, and I just picked up my things and left, and that was it. And then I said, I want to become this woman, and I'm going to do everything to be her relentlessly, and anything outside of that, I'm not going to compromise, and I'm going to have boundaries. I'm going to have values. I didn't even know what a boundary was. I didn't even know what a value was. I had no understand that, oh, I had a need and it mattered. I didn't even know what needs were. So it's like, if you don't know, you don't know. Like I'm just walking around traumatized as this little girl who wants to be loved while I date abusive men, and I self-sabotage and I allow people to treat me like crap. And I'm like, well, I'm going to kill myself. So there's nothing else to lose besides myself. So let's go.
Holy shit. Like all of these, so many parallels in everything you just said was exactly me. Same thing about 3 years ago. And I loved what you said about the pain and the suffering you experienced due to a lack of standards. Because when you have no standards, you know, your life really will fall apart. And, you know, that was definitely me for a bit, being a shitty husband, you know, cheating, just being a bad dude. And, you know, even after, you know, we got divorced, and that wasn't even the reason we got divorced. Actually, we got divorced years later, a few years later, 2 years later. But I felt so fucking guilty because I had no standards. I didn't know who the fuck I was. And it was just looking in a mirror. I'm like ready to smash the fucking thing, because I don't know who I am. I don't like the person I see. And like yourself, it was like, it's time to burn this shit down, and everything needs to change. Everything. And the biggest one, I think you just called it out, is like, who you associate yourself with is fucking huge. And building this new network that I have now, like it's unbreakable. Like go ahead and fuck with me now. I dare you to try. You know what I mean?
Mess around and find out.
It's like, but it's because the bar is so high, and the bar is so high now because it used to be so low. And when you flip that switch and you make that transformation, it's like, okay, it's on. And I feel like most people don't even get that chance or give that, like, most people aren't able to identify it to a point where they're able to make those changes and, really put in the work to be exactly who they want to be and who they're supposed to be. So when you do see it, like you've seen it, I've seen it, it's pretty special.
Yeah. And I think when too, I was continuously like going back and reverting to, so I was healthy. I would eat well. I was a good person. I would show up. I would work like a horse, but I kept abusive relationships in my life. And so like, you can't have, like, I knew I wanted to do something like Phoenix Fit, but I can't serve people when I'm engaging in that kind of stuff. So it's like, you can't be this. It's not to say that you can't struggle or have sin, but it's like, if you're not committed to transforming that, it's always going to leak into your personal life, into your finances, into your energy. Like, you can't show up as your best version. So I said, and my greatest fear was like abandonment and rejection, where I just came from like my father just always coming and leaving and never having that security. And that's really where my walk with Christ started to blossom, because I left and I said, this is all I have. Like, I have to be willing to give it all up to see who he is, to see who I am in him, and to just go full force. Like, let's go full force on my podcast. Let's go full force on Phoenix Fit and see what happens, because I know what self-sabotage is. I know what's keeping me around people. Like, people, this one family, the Oaks, saw me, and they saw me for who I was, and they kept like reinforcing that in me. But then I had all these people around me who were like, wouldn't ask about my podcast, like wouldn't include me in things. And that just kept me being like, I'm worthy, I'm good enough, let me earn it, let me show you who I am. And if you're committed to that version of yourself, you're never going to like own your greatness. And if you're so afraid of being rejected or not liked, like, you're going to be a chameleon in life. And I would just try to fit in everywhere I'd go. And I give myself grace, because as a child, when you didn't get the opportunity to develop properly, when you just were in survival mode, which you know all too well, you grow up to be an adult that's inauthentic. And when you're inauthentic, there's no sense of like actual real connection. So that was like a big part in that. And now I have such high standards. People, oh, your standards are too high, you're single. And it's like, no, actually, I just actually have normal standards, and everyone else's standards are too low. And I know what as a woman to date low standards, and I will never, ever be that woman. I'm not like, here, oh, he needs to have a six pack. Like, he needs to love the Lord. He needs to be fit. He needs to have values. He needs to provide. He needs to lead. And that's like crazy in this world of society, of thinking like, my standards are too high. It's like, no, your standards are too low.
Absolutely. And so many people, and this just maybe, I don't know where it comes from. Maybe it comes from just being broken or a piece of broken, but people's lack of standards, especially in relationships, like they're settling. They'll just settle. And definitely, actually, having gone through a divorce and been married once, and having done this kind of work, it's like not settling for shit. Same. Like, I don't need a supermodel. I don't need, all the things, right? But like you said, there's those certain core things, those boxes that need to be checked. And, women and men both are entitled to those standards in relationships.
Yeah. And I think when people don't have standards, and they don't have values, and they don't prioritize, and they don't know who they are, like you said, like, I didn't know who I was. So I was just being whoever anyone wanted me to be. Like, if I needed to be this high performing woman who could do it all, which I still love to serve a man, but like, it was for the wrong motives, right? It was like not rooted in worth. It was rooted in earning. And I think when you had a childhood that was maybe built off of earning love, or trying to earn love or keep love, it feels like kind of normal to you. So yeah, I love my life. I love having boundaries. I genuinely don't care if people don't like me. And that is so freeing. Like, it's so crazy how my life is right now, and how terrible it used to be caring what people thought and trying to mold into what they wanted me to be. And now how much love and greatness I have in my life, actually being the complete opposite of like, I know who I am. I'm so confident in who I am. And I am like committed to always evolving. I'm not cocky. I'm not arrogant. But if you don't like me for who I authentically am, I'm okay with that. And I said, there's nothing worse in life to care what people think of you for the inauthentic version of yourself. Because that's what I used to live my whole life with. I wasn't authentic, and I would care what people would think. So I would try. But now I'm like, hey, I love Jesus. I love fitness. I eat a certain way. I sleep a certain way. I don't drink alcohol. I'm waiting till marriage. like, there's a lot of things in my life that I'm like, yes, and that's okay if you don't like me. I'm not
Yeah,
everyone's cup of
and
tea.
I've said it probably 100 times on my podcast. It's like once you get past that hurdle of just not caring or caring what people think, and you start to really just really understand who you are, and you know exactly who you are and what you want. Um, that is such a great position of power to put yourself in, and most people aren't able to find themselves in that position because they are so worried and what people might think or what they might say or what they might do. And yeah, you can't even put a price tag on that because once you're there, it's pretty fucking cool. And that's where I got to finally about I started really working on myself about 2.5, 3 years ago. But when I started to really not care what people think was right around when I started putting myself out there with certain things about 16 months ago. Right around when I started reading the Bible, actually, is when I started to say, fuck it. Like, I'm going to be all over the internet. You're going to like me. You're going to love me. You're going to hate me. I really don't care. It doesn't matter to me. And I love it. I love, and one of the things I noticed recently after doing that soft white underbelly, and I appreciate your feedback on that. Thank you. Was the people that did see you at your worst, they're not all that interested in seeing you get better. They like you there, and they're content with you being there. And they're always going to remember you that way. That's what I learned within the last 2 weeks or so.
Yeah, I think there's a shedding, right? And that's like comes back to like being a phoenix, right? Like there was people that I still loved, but who were committed to the old version of myself, and even like my family when I was like really came home from the jungle, and then I started doing all these things and realizing like all we did is lie about dad. Like he actually needs help. Like we can't just sit here and suppress pain, and you got to kind of like buck the current a little bit and be willing to buck the current, because when you know the cost, it's like being afraid of the right things, right? Like I used to be afraid of man, and now I'm not. I fear God. But other than that, it's so detrimental to your mental health. Like, it's not to say, Denny, that if I hear someone talking about me, it's not to say that I'm like not a human being to say, oh, that stinks. Like, that's unfortunate. That may like hurt my feelings for like a minute or a day. But it's not to say I believe or I need to prove to them or I need to earn, because one thing I value is integrity and kindness and goodness in people. So I know if someone's speaking ill of me, unless they're like, oh, she's a fit Jesus freak,
Thank
I'd be
you.
like, yeah, that's absolutely, thank you. That's absolutely true. But if they're like, oh, she's, like, but also if there's something to address, if I hear someone saying some things and there's like an ability for me to confront conflict and assert myself to say like, hey, like, is this what you said? Or do you need to speak, do we need to clear something up? But yeah, like I don't care, because I know what it costs to care, and that almost led me to checking out, and I just will never be brought back to that place. But I think when you don't know who you are, it's very easy to compromise on standards and values and to live in a very dysfunctional way. It's like, well, okay, so you care what someone thinks and what's going to happen.
Yeah.
What's going to happen? Like,
It's
they're going to go
yeah.
about eating their
It's
dinner.
gonna
Like, who
affect
cares?
you
Like,
more than them, right? Like
what do you?
the more
Yeah, like,
yeah, because they just talk shit and forget about it. Like and they're saying it to hurt you. So if you let it affect you, it's gonna affect you more than it affected them to even make that statement. So it's yeah it and I went through the comments, not in like a way like, oh, I have to read every comment, but it was like these people took the time to watch my interview, so I want to at least like the comment, or there were some very nice ones and stuff like that where I felt the need to respond. But the negative ones, I mean, there was probably out of 1,800 comments maybe 5, not even, I don't even think there was 5. But it's just interesting. But again, it's such a powerful position to be in when you really don't care what people have to say. But moving on, let's talk about what we're doing, kind of together. We're teammates now in the Forge. Talk to me how you got associated with the Forge, with Nick, with all of that. And because I read your posts all the time. I think, your content that you put into the group and into the community, I think is awesome. So I want to hear more about, your goals there and, what we're doing together, and we kind of push that message.
Yeah, I've followed Nick. One of my good friends, Mike, and my brother have always followed Nick, and I started following Nick maybe 5 years ago. And there's some things that I've reposted of his, and I put an audio to a few of my workouts, and he's always such a sweet guy, would like it or repost it himself. And then maybe about 6 months ago, he randomly DM'd me on Instagram and asked if I had a website. And then I said, yeah, sure. But I sent it to him. I didn't hear back from him for a few months. And then he said, you want to jump on this call and have this opportunity? I was like, wow, okay, cool, sure. I'm a yes girl and figure it out on the way. Of course, if we align and his values align with my values, that's a huge thing. Just because he's a big name and he seems like a great guy, that doesn't mean that I don't take precaution into always seeing if this is a fit, right? And it is. Nick and I hit it off immediately. I resonate a lot with him in his journey. He has a huge heart. He's so funny, and I love his style of leadership. And his story is phenomenal. His resilience, God's hand is on his life. The fact that he's still alive, the fact that his leg was gone and then he wanted to go back into being a Green Beret, like that is a very I really value and respect resilience and like beating the odds. And when I see that in any individual, I want that, right? And I respect that. So yeah, we hit it off. I shared a little bit about what I do and teach people about emotional resilience, discipline and leadership, and through like a more of an emotional, like mental health perspective, not just like do this and do that. And then we just kind of went from there. And he's like, let's figure this out together. I'm like, I'm game. So I just want to reach more people, make an impact, and I've always been kind of a lone ranger. Self-isolation is definitely my greatest go-to. So I've always, just kind of done things alone and forged my own path. But as someone like Nick, I respect and I could look up to and see what he's doing. And I want to be associated with that. So
that's awesome. Yeah, that's really cool. We're both from Massachusetts, so it's funny. I followed him probably for about 3 or 4 years. And I had probably 3 people just say, hey man, you should connect with Nick Lavery with everything you're doing with your podcast, have him on and all this stuff. And every time somebody wanted to introduce me, I was like, no, don't introduce me. For 2 reasons, right? The first was like, well, actually really just one reason. I was like, I didn't want to be some random guy getting introduced to some other random guy with no value. I'm not bringing any value. It's like, hey, nice to meet you. Like, why? What's the point? Right. And, even when I met Nick, I knew eventually I'd meet him organically, either somewhere up here in Massachusetts or a veterans thing, whatever. And I ended up meeting him at a veterans benefit, and George introduced me to him. And same thing, we kind of hit it off. He was like, well, let's get on a call. So we got on a call, talked for about 2 hours, same thing. Values are aligned, everything. But it's funny because I never had any interest whatsoever with doing any type of online coaching, any of that stuff. I didn't want to do it. I thought everything's just so oversaturated. Everybody's an online coach. Everybody's an online whatever. But you meet a guy like that and it's as real as it gets. And it's, who doesn't want to be a part of that? When somebody like that says, you know what, I think you'd be a good asset, I want to bring you on. Like it changed my whole perspective on it. And now it's awesome to be a part of this community. And I actually had my first speaking engagement with them in March. I'm pumped. Yeah, I'm pumped.
Oh, nice.
The USA flag football team. That's a new Olympic sport, I guess. Yeah, so I'm speaking to I guess they're organizational people. It's in Indianapolis the same time as the combine. So they're all going to be there for the combine as well. So I'll be representing Team Machine for that. I'm pretty pumped. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. I love it.
But yeah, no. So, but everybody in this thing is awesome. Rebecca, she's a fucking beast.
Yeah, she's so sweet too. I think when I look to a leader or leadership, I always look top down. And I've seen and witnessed leaders with terrible fruit. And I think any great leader bears great fruit. And when I met everyone in person and how we instantly all became best friends and loved each other, and just it flowed so seamlessly. And I know that that's an indicator of Nick's leadership and not just a coincidence. So
yeah, he vetted everybody out. He does his homework. I mean, I don't think he's going to be associated with anybody who he thinks going to be even slightly negatively impact what we're looking to accomplish. So it's pretty cool to be a part of it.
Yeah, I'm excited. He has such a vision, and I'm excited to see where we're all going to go, like individually, and the connections we're going to make, and the impact. Like, I'm ready to like mess things up in the best way
Exactly.
possible. So, because I feel like sometimes like the personal development like space could get not cheesy, but like like I don't know,
Yeah.
like forceful, or like you could also be like a person who like lifts weights and like it, like represents this like warrior of a person, and also get up on stage and talk to people. So I like the contrast of not having to be this like tailored person, of like an individual to be on a team. So I like that
Yeah,
part.
and that when we first talked, that was one of the things that drew me in, was like that we could kind of just be that way, instead of like, there are other things out there that are similar, but everybody's exactly the same. Everybody's preaching the same things, talking about the
Mhm.
same thing. And it's like this, almost like an organizational effort to push just one message. This is different in the sense that, we have a lot of different people from a lot of different backgrounds with a lot of different areas of expertise, where I just think that collectively makes us more lethal. Makes us right. I mean, if you think about it, like that makes us way. We
Yeah,
got people in the mental domain, the leadership domain, the finance domain, like all of these things. So I think it makes us just way more, overall, just a bigger asset and better asset. So,
absolutely. Everyone's great.
um, I'm jealous of the weather you have down there right now. It's freezing.
It started
It
to
is
get warm
free. Yeah.
again.
What's that mean? It's
Yeah.
what was cold?
No, today was like cold. No, come on. Cold was
Okay,
like
that is cold
38.
for you
That's
guys.
cold.
That's cold. It was like we had like
Yeah,
it was
that's
like 4 degrees last week one
freezing.
day, and I'm like, fuck, I need to get out of here.
Oof.
Um,
Yeah, I don't know why people choose to live up
it's
there anymore. I love
it's our
visiting my family,
family.
but
I don't know. It's my fault for staying. I'll
uh,
give you that. But yeah. So
it's yeah, I
talk
love
to
it here.
me. We'll kind of end with this, but I'm just curious. Talk to me about where people can find you, what you're doing next, and yeah, like your Instagram. Tell us all the places we can find you and all the stuff that you're doing.
Yeah, so my business is called Phoenix Fit. PHENYX.fit is my website. So you could look at the program that I do online, and that's the best way to get in touch with me. My podcast is called the Kate Hastings Podcast. I upload a podcast every single week. I've been doing it since 2019. I have a bunch of great topics on there, like healing, trauma, discipline, leadership, just personal development overall. And then my Coach Kate one on Instagram and TikTok is where I'm pretty much most active on social media.
Outstanding. I love it. Well, I appreciate you taking the time. We've been trying to set this up for a couple weeks, but yeah, I'm gonna try to get everybody on, but you're the first one, besides like some of the guys that were on before I joined the Forge. But it's been awesome talking with you. I've been wanting to get to know you for a while. So thank you. I appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me on. I appreciate you, and I'll have you on mine when I start to put
Yeah,
guests on.
absolutely. I can't wait. You let me know when. I'm in.
Awesome.